Riding up and down the street where all the children are. I know I can't go far in my kitty car. Riding up and down the street where all the children are. My mother used to sing it to us.
I don't know
She'd
that.
sing to us, when we were little and she was feeding us. I was 4 years old. My earliest memory. I had 4 years old and I had a doll. I was outside playing with the doll and it had rained. And the doll fell in the water, got dirty. And the reason I remember that is because my mother smacked me. I didn't think that was fair, It was only a doll. I didn't break the doll, just her dress got dirty. But my mother felt strongly that that would teach me to take hold the doll better the next time. But that's one of my earliest memories. Where I was born at 1140 Blake Avenue. Imagine me remembering something like that. And then they had to move to pay less rent. I don't remember that address. It was Logan Street, I think. And then it got even worse, and that's when we moved down to the Lower East Side to the tenement, which I described yesterday. One thing my father was good about is on a Sunday, my mother would pack a wonderful picnic lunch, take the blanket, and we went to Prospect Park because we lived in Brooklyn. Went to Prospect Park, and I'd take a book, or, I remember one year we were in art. We would with some sort of a metal stick, making a picture in the tin, and I took that with me, and we would read. My father would take the radio with the battery and have little music, and I remember going to that. And also, my parents were very good about museums, but they were in Manhattan. So also on a Sunday. We didn't do things on Saturday.
Right.
But we also went to my grandparents every week. Worked there. Once in a while, something else would come up, but basically we were there. And that was our time to get together with the other cousins and aunts and uncles. Oh yeah, I remember that we had a neighbor. Both the husband and wife were, could I use the word mute? Yeah, I don't know if it's politically correct. Anyway, they were. But they had a son who was perfectly normal. His name was Leo, I remember. And they couldn't talk, or at least they didn't know what speech was. They weren't so advanced, think of all those years ago. So that was an interesting neighbor. The neighbor downstairs was my mother's friend, and my mother would go down there just to gossip. And the girl down there, because I would be left upstairs to do the chores, the girl down there would bang on the pipe in the bedroom, and I knew I had plenty of time, because my mother, when she said, okay, I'm going upstairs, it was still another half hour. But I had time to put away my book and quickly. Just once in a while, my mother would say, gee, it's taking you a long time to dust. The truth was, I was reading my book, They were interesting. I don't know if I should tell this story. He was known for being very kind of miserly. He'd leave her money in the linen closet. But the famous story about that, do you remember me telling you the story about, he would buy a bottle of ginger ale and he felt it was his. They had 2 girls and a boy, and they couldn't have it. So when he'd take a drink, he would take a pen and mark where it was. So one day, when he was at work, the daughter took a drink, and of course it went down below the mark. And she filled it up to the mark with, and he came home. He didn't know anything. It was ginger ale, remember, the right color. And he just said, "Gee, this tastes funny," but it was up to the mark. He never knew. There was no odor. It wasn't that much that there would be an odor, but she did it purposely. You talk about weird neighbors. We had a neighbor that used to buy, they used to have like these little, we call them Indian nuts, and they had a nice little taste inside the nut. And she would sit there all day outside on her chair, cracking the Indian nuts with her teeth and eating it.
Wow.
I remember Mrs. Alper, that was her name. Interesting that, I'm surprised I remember that. The other ones were Lerner, I remember the name. Well, not too much, because my mother really took very good, care of us. I don't remember. I did have the measles. I did have chicken pox, the childhood diseases. But we got pretty healthy. I had a pretty good attendance record in school.
Well, tell us the story about how you lost your teeth.
Oh, well. When I was diagnosed as being anemic, one of the things they wanted me to have was iron.
How old were you?
I guess I must have been about 10.
Okay.
And they didn't have it in a pill form. It was a liquid. They also didn't realize that it would corrode the teeth little by little. Because they never said after you take, I don't know how many times a day I had to take it, brush your teeth. Nobody told me that. I brushed my teeth in the morning, but during the day I took that iron stuff, and it weakened the teeth. The roots were very strong, but the teeth were falling apart, and they didn't have implants or, things like that. And those days, I went to a clinic because it was cheaper. So it was cheaper to just pull the tooth when it became riddled with cavities, and little by little. So the end of it was that I would have had left the two front teeth. However, the two front teeth, they weren't buck, but one was like over the other one. And I thought, and then I'd have this little metal thing where the bridge would be with the teeth.
Right.
I thought, what am I saving that for?
Yeah.
So that's how I lost it. I was 23 years old when I lost that.
So how many teeth are real?
I only have 8.
Okay. Would you mind showing us? for posterity's sake?
Yes, I would.
Can you take your teeth out for
I
us?
think somebody looking at this would. I think what's funny is just this. This is how I entertain my grandchildren. My great-grandchildren haven't quite. I remember, though, I think it was Dominic, in awe. He couldn't understand it. He put his handle to his teeth, and he's trying, he can't get it out, He thought it was something wonderful that I could do, take my teeth out.
Can you pull them out all the way for us?
All the way.
All the way.
Take,
Yeah, to pull them out.
pull them out or take them out?
Take them out.
Here's your grandma. This is really me.
That's great.
That's what Grandpa sees when he gets up. No wonder he stumbles.
Did you have a long
I
or-
had such straight hair. I really looked like very straight hair. Always had a problem with my hair. That's why it's become so important. But when I lived in Carmel, those days I wore them very formally up, very quickly, because I was giving concerts and all. But my mother was very strict about it, always being combed and all. The only thing about my hair was that the color. The color was really it was what they called strawberry blonde. And people always commented on it, the color of it. But I remember when I went to visit, the first time I went to Grandpa's house, his sister said, and I stood like against the wall, and the wall turned red from the color. I was really, really red, much more, you know. It faded as I got older,
Right.
you know, yeah. And I just decided, it costs a lot of money to have your hair colored. I didn't decide. I went to a hairdresser, and I said, well, they put in something called Dawn. She said, why are you coloring your hair? You have a beautiful color, natural. So this is my natural color, really. At this point, it is.
Right.
Anyway.
At what point did you start curling your hair?
That had to start, believe it or not, I think, when Grandpa went to med school. And it was something pleasant, you know, for me while he was away. My mother encouraged me to do that. That's when I started to become so dependent upon. Always had nice clothes. I liked, especially liked long skirts. But I always had nice clothes, yeah. Oh, I think we wore saddle shoes and socks, you know, I don't know. We didn't, those days, we were much more formal. We didn't go on a plane unless you had a hat and gloves and all that. But I remember I had a purple coat once I liked very much. That was something. My father went with us down on the east side to a place that sold coats. And so we finally settled on this one for me, and he said to the owner, and what would you give me off if I got another one, because he was going to get it for my mother. I was so embarrassed that he was talking about the price that I ran out of the store. And he reprimanded me when he came out. He said, what did you run out for? He made a profit anyway. He wouldn't have given it to me unless he were making a profit. I remember I liked that coat. Yes, we had green sheets that came out every week with the words, and we memorized that. That was really when I was in high school, you know. But that's also about the time I started to study seriously classical music, and I didn't know that much of it. I didn't follow with the popular music there. But certainly Cole Porter, Jerome Kern, those people. But afterward, it just became noise to me.
What about dancing?
No, I never was much of a dancer. I do love to watch people dance.
Yeah.
But I never was much of a dancer. I was not a swing jitterbug. No, we have, in New York, we have the butcher shop, the fish store. That's the thing I'm disappointed here in California, where I live in California. There's no such thing. You have to buy your fish in the supermarket.
Yeah.
See, we didn't have supermarkets. We had individual stores, and you got to know the owners. It was really kind of nice.
Yeah. Did you guys ever eat? Did you ever eat out in New York?
Really.
Really?
If we did, it was in a kosher deli or something. Always, we were careful that way. Although I will tell you that when my sister, she was young, maybe 4 years old, and I took her as a surprise to Manhattan to see Cinderella, I think it was. And it was at the Radio City. It was either Cinderella or Snow White. But anyway, and I loved taking her because she was so beautiful with her curls and all. But I didn't look quite old enough to be her mother, but I acted like it. I would take my ring and turn it around so I wasn't married, So then we went to, right at that point, right across the street, was a restaurant called the House of Chan. And I took her in there, and I said, now, Ricky, you have to remember that if Daddy asks us where we ate, remember we ate fish. Okay. So we come home. My father said, "Did you have a good time?" Yes. So, where'd you eat? What did you eat? And she said, we had fish. He said, oh, that's good. She said, yeah, it was a very nice Chinese waiter. And my father gave me a dirty look. He had a very nice Chinese waiter. Now the Chinese waiters work all over. They even work at Ratner's. Yeah, it was a small one, though. But that grandmother of mine, the Esther, always, when I went to visit her, she would always give me a few cents, and that added up. But
Did you save your money, or did you try to?
no, I saved it. In those days, they encouraged children in elementary schools. They opened up little bank accounts, and they could put money in and watch the way it would go. Yeah.
Did you guys go on any road trips or
No,
vacations?
because we didn't have a car.
Okay.
Never had a car. But we went to the parks, and we went to the museums on the subway system, or we had trolley cars in those days too. And one of the things my mother did in the hot summer was to take us to the trolley car on the 2 blocks away, and ride to the end of the line, and then get off, pay a fare, and ride back to where we got on. And because they took the windows out, and it was just bars where the windows were, there was a breeze that went through the trolley car. And so we enjoyed that. Another thing, she would take us on the subway, which went into being the elevated train. So we could ride that to the end of the line and back. We look out the windows and people's windows as we passed. But we weren't much for going to the beach. My mother was concerned about getting the sand back in her house. But our outings were with grandparents. I did go a couple of times, from the settlement house. They had an affordable trip. And I remember there they taught us how to wash our clothes in the stream. And I came back with a bunch of moldy clothes that my mother had us fill out beside the suitcase, which was moldy because it was damp,
Yeah.
But I remember having a good time. I remember enjoying that. Once or twice I went there during the summertime. But then I would go to one of my aunt's house for a week, to spend time with them. Oh, yeah. No, I had a couple of movie stars that I kept albums. One was Cary Grant, and the other was Ray Milland.
Okay.
And I knew everything about them, every article that I ever saw or cut out of a magazine, I pasted in this album. It's funny. Originally, I wanted to be a librarian because I love books so much. And I thought that would be wonderful for me. But then I found out that in order to be a librarian, you have to have another degree in library science. And that would have been spending more money. So I had to focus on something I could do in 4 years, as soon as I got out of college. And that was teaching, elementary school teaching. That was open to me. But I really would have liked to have been a librarian. I thought, the librarians I knew were very nice. They would, when it would rain outside, they'd put paper on the book so, it shouldn't get wet. And but that didn't work out for me. Became a teacher.
Do you remember any new inventions or any inventions that were
I guess
exciting?
the car, really came into much more play. No, maybe the vacuum cleaner. I don't remember. No. Inventions. Mix master. We didn't have before. My mother did everything by hand. Oh, not until I was married and I lived in the Bronx. I learned how to drive. Although you really, in the city, there are always cabs and buses and all that. But I did learn to drive there, and I only took about 365 lessons. I got so close to the instructor that they thought I would have to invite him to Dad's bar mitzvah. I took so many lessons. But I did pass the first time I took it. No, I didn't. I remember that on one of the tests, I was backing into a space, mostly, see, it had to do with parking. I was backing into a space, and I hear, it was the pole. I knew that was going to be it, and it was. Second time, on a broken U, I stalled. Third time, it was pouring rain, and that guy couldn't wait to get back to the place. He brushed past me, and that was it. But I really didn't drive till I got back in Carmel. And in Carmel, you know, they had 2 lanes. One goes this way, one goes this way, you know. And you don't have to parallel park, you know, there. So it was easy for me.
Do you remember your first car?
No. I remember that I had a Dodge one time. But no, I don't. And we didn't get that till after Grandpa came back and, you know, was had finished his internship. Oh, no, it's always things that people did for me, like the time in junior high school they had a demerit book, and my sewing teacher was going to give me a demerit, and she couldn't find the book. That's because one of my friends was sitting on it. So and then she forgot. She was an older woman, so she forgot. Actually, the first one I went to was in Brooklyn. We were still living there. My mother did not believe in my going to kindergarten because she said that's just playing with crayons. So I didn't go to school till I was in the 1st grade. And I have nice memories there because we walked to school. There were no school buses, and because they had them in the neighborhoods. But I had to go past what they call the lots, an empty plot of just land waiting to be built on. And what I remember most about that was the smell of the weeds after a rain and how appealing it was to me. And I did very well in school, and that was wonderful because that's when my brother was born, and I had no jealousy, you know. I mean, I had, you know, he was just this beautiful little baby, and I had my school life. But then we moved down to the Lower East Side. I had to go to get to that school under the bridge, you know, the Williamsburg Bridge, the stone part of it, you know, that, to get to that school, and it was PS 110. I do remember that, and I remembered that, the thing about that they had rolling walls, you know, when they were going to have we always had auditorium. And when during the time of the week that we were going to have it, they just rolled the doors back, and then 4 classrooms became one big area where children would sit. It was considered, you know, old-fashioned, and the newer schools that they built didn't look like that. And now they're coming back to it. It's become very useful to have that. It's funny how that. It still exists. The building still exists. In those days, schools had numbers. You went to PS 89, PS 110, then they started giving them names. Mostly to give us feeling of pride to the population that was not white, you know. So you had a lot of black educators, and the names of those, that's how they named the school. So I had to walk to school there too, and I was always a plus experience. But when I was 5 years old and had a mastoidectomy, the mastoid bone in the ear, they didn't have penicillin when I was 5 years old. So when you got an infection, the only thing they could do was remove the bone, which is what they did. But as soon as the school got word, you know, in the forms that you fill out, that they decided at one point that I had to be in the lip reading class, learn how to lip read. So I went to the lip reading class, and I can tell you, I lasted 3 weeks because, as the teacher told my parents, their method was different kinds of games that you had to participate in. And I kept winning every single game they did the whole day, and it became discouraging. Nobody else could win. I was there first. And they finally decided that I don't need to go to the lip reading and put me back into the regular classes. And what I learned from that is not to tell them that I had a massoidectomy, because they always got excited about it and there was no reason to.
So they assumed that that would make you deaf?
Yes,
And-
that would
and
make,
didn't.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it did, it did. So, I remember they had a beautiful public library, and I'd tell this story often. I would go to the library, my mother would take me, and I would pick up like 6 books and bring them home. And that's when we lived downtown at Lower East Side, but we all had fire escapes. I would sit on the fire escape. My mother would give me an apple or bread and butter or something, but she was always sure to say, and I want you to bring in the peel or whatever you don't eat. And I had to show her when I came in, because what she didn't want me to do was throwing it down when I finished with it. And I'd read, and that gave me another life. And that was the years of the red fairy book and the blue fairy book and all that I really enjoyed, you know. So that was a very positive experience. We lived there 2 years, and that's when we were accepted into the public projects, and so we moved to Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And and they skipped me. In those days, you went to school at like the 4A, 4B, 5A, 5B. So I skipped from 2A to 3A, and then I skipped again from 3B to 4B or something like that. I skipped. Yeah, that's why I was 16 when I graduated. So then there was the school we walked to, elementary school, from the project. So because we walked, we always, and women, there weren't jobs, I guess, but the women didn't work. They were at home. So I always went home for lunch. But I had a real lunch. I remember feeling very proud about it. My friends would have a sandwich, not me. My mother did not believe in that. You had to have something cooked. And I think I said it someplace else on this tape, the kind of lunch she would make for me. So I had a feeling of superiority, you know, because when I tell my friends, the eyes would open up at that, what I had for lunch. My Latin started in high school and continued into college. And unfortunately, I could only take 5 years of it because that's all they offered. But no, the languages started because they had junior high school. So that went from grade 7 to 9, I guess, or 6 to 8, something like that. But my school was always a very positive experience. I thought I was the only one that was a little sad on Friday. Everybody was happy it was Friday, but that meant I had to wait till Monday.
Do you remember any of your teachers?
I remember that I had a Mrs. Werbin, Werbin, because I had her 3 successive semesters. So that's why I guess I remember her name. I don't remember the others, and I don't even remember that sewing teacher in junior high school that took a dislike to me, wanted to give me demerit. I do remember about her that she had purple hair, which I thought was incredible, you know, to have purple hair. I think my favorite subject in elementary school was, they didn't call it social studies, it was geography and history. I loved it because it was like a story. That was my favorite. I always wanted to get an A, and I remember once I was very, very upset, came home with my report card, and I had a B+ in math, and I was crying so hard that I do remember my mother smacked me in the face because she thought I was hysterical. You know, I was so upset that I could, you know, I even got A in gym. I mean, I got A in everything, and there was this B+. So math was always, and the teachers would always say, do you have any questions? And I really didn't, till I got home. And of course, there was nobody really to help me there, you know. But my school experiences were all plus. I loved school. Can see an image of myself going when I went to junior high school, which was further than the
No, what school was that?
uh,
Junior high school? What
junior
number?
high school,
Or-
196.
And then just for the record, what was the high school you went to?
Girls High.
Girls High, where was that?
Girls High in Brooklyn.
Oh.
You know who went there? Lena Horne went to that school, but she dropped out. She
Oh.
didn't graduate. And I remember skipping to school and singing to myself, I love school, I love school, I really did. I can only smile when I think of my school experience. And so I was in, I entered high school when I was 13. There was 3 years of high school. And those were the war years, you know. So we had to take I forget what they call it, but you had to take one course that was like training, drafting was the one I took. And I really enjoyed that because I was able, the thinner you can draw the arrow, the more appealing it was to the teacher, and I was able to draw those thin arrows. I like that because that's only, you know, involves straight lines. I chose to go to girls' school. That was my choice. That meant I would have to travel. And because that was in the Bedford-Stuyvesant district. And the travel involved 2 trolley cars. I could have chosen to go to girls' commercial, but that's where they learn typing and stenography and you know, business things. But I was headed for the academic. I had to take a test to get into my high school. You had to maintain a B+. And my graduating class was 200. I knew everybody in my class.
Wow.
They knew me, and it was a wonderful experience. We didn't have boys, that distraction, you know. You had to walk in the halls quietly, no talking, single file with your book in the right hand. And so the teachers, and there was always a teacher standing outside to watch that it was an orderly
Now, you
change
went
of
so
classes.
young. You went into high school so young.
Yeah,
It wasn't a problem socializing?
no,
No.
no. It wasn't for me. I didn't have an, I was the GO, General Organization. But that was like they was the president and I was the treasurer. They had a drama. They had, you know, extra choir and all that. And they latched on to me with my singing. Consequently, I was the one that and I thought, me? They chose me of all those girls, I'm a member of a real minority, to sing the Ave Maria. Yeah, I sang it. Graduation. And so, and I made some very, very dear, wonderful friends. But one time I had a ticket. Somebody had given us 2 tickets to go to the Brooklyn Academy of Music on a Thursday night. And I was going to go with my friend. It was safe for us to travel, you know. But to make it easier, I would do some of the homework and she would do some. She would do the math and I would do, let's say, the social studies or the Latin or something. As I told you, my nemesis was math. And we handed in our homework and we had a substitute that day. And the teacher announced, at the end of the class, I would like to see Gloria Fuchs and Jane Lesko.
Oh, no.
And I didn't know what that was going to be about, but when I got up there, and the rest of the class had left, she said, I have something interesting here. I have 2 homework pages with the name Gloria Block.
Oh,
Gloria Fuchs. What happened is I copied the math so well. Or maybe it was Jane Lesko.
Yeah.
I copied it so well that I copied her name. And she said, now I don't know what to do about this. I know you have a wonderful record, but I feel I should tell Mr. Hunt, her name was De Hunt, who was a terror. She was the one that was very sarcastic, and had, like the Italian girls go up to write the problem on the board and they couldn't do it. And she'd stand there and tap her foot, and the rest of us in the class would die. She said, I'm waiting, and then she'd say something, I'm not making this up, like, but I bet you know how to eat spaghetti.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
So we were in terror. The other thing was that I hadn't done my Latin homework. I was very good in Latin. My Latin teacher thought I was going to graduate summa cum laude. I mean, she really was, and I just took to it. It was a natural, talent, I guess. I would do my homework on the subway, but anyway, so instead, I wrote her a note saying that I had laryngitis. And I couldn't do the homework.
Why couldn't you do it?
I don't know. I really don't even remember the reason, but I gave it to her. Well, then I'm sitting in the class, and she asked a question that nobody knew the answer, but I did. Because I used to study the footnotes. So I knew the answer. It was a difficult question, and I knew it. And I just burst out with the answer. And I remember she looked at me, smiled, and said, oh, I'm glad to hear your voice came back. All I had to do was be true. I just somehow couldn't do the homework. It was so silly of me, really. But that's the closest to a prank I could think of. But it taught me a lesson.
Yes.
She became my school friend when I went to junior high school. Although she lived just a block away from me, the zoning was such that her elementary school was across the street. But I lived in the project. I had to go to the other elementary school, PS 89. So we were very close. She was an only child. She was Catholic. Her mother was Catholic. Her father was Methodist or something. And just, with a kind of friend that you both know what the other is thinking. I had a lot of fun with Jackie. She had allergies, so she'd have to go for allergy shots on Friday, and sometimes I went with her, If ever I did mischievous stuff, it was with Jackie. But she was in the drama club, and you had to work yourself up. The first year you were with them, you had to be in the crew. So they were doing Arsenic and Old Lace. And one of her jobs was to stand behind a screen. We didn't have a stage with a curtain. It was just like a semicircular stage, and they had a folding screen at either end, and you'd come in through the door there. But she had to stand behind there to set up the second act, which starts like at midnight. So it's dark, the stage is dim, and all you hear is the chime of the clock 12 times. And she had it on a string on her finger, and she hit it a few times, and then all of a sudden the audience hears clang, 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 clang. She broke and fell off. She was so scared. And her father in the audience called out, "That's my daughter."
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Talk about pranks. She thought she would never live that down. She was good. And as a matter of fact, when she ended up living in San Rafael in California, and she did a lot of community theater, and I went to see a couple of them when I moved to California, and I was so proud to hear her introduce me as her best friend. Because when you live that 3,000 miles away, at the beginning you do keep in contact, but then life catches you. You have children yourself, And,
At your wedding?
oh, my wedding was first.
Yeah,
I got
okay.
married first, and it was understood she was always going to be my maid of honor. but she wore a gold cross. Being my maid of honor would have necessarily had her be under the bema in the altar. And so we asked her whether she would either wear something that hid the cross or not wear it that day. And she didn't want to compromise. Not unkind, she just didn't. And I understood and she understood. So I asked my cousin, Lila. As I said, ironically, a couple of years went by before she got married, and she married Lutheran. And she converted to Lutheranism.
But then you sang at her wedding,
But I sang at her wedding.
and you were
yes.
pregnant at that point.
I remember it was the Park Avenue Church. Oh my goodness, when I went with her for her allergy shot, it was the last day of math for the both of us in college. See, she went
In
to
college?
college when we went, yeah. And we both had that thing about math. And so just for fun, because the colors of the school were blue and yellow, yeah. We wore one blue sock and one yellow sock. And then we took, you know that they used to take a string in geometry, you know, and put it against the board and you could draw circles with it. We took that thread and we tied her right foot to my left foot. And then when we were waiting on the train for the train to come in, we took all our math notes and tore them up into itty-bitty pieces of paper, held onto it, and when the train door opened, we threw it up in the air. That's terrible. Threw it up in the air and went into the train and walked to the opposite, you know, the door on the other side, turn around, and in walks this woman with a flowered hat. They wore hats then. And these were all flowers and full of these. We were so frightened that we opened the intervening doors and we ran through to the next car. And when the train stopped at the next stop, we got off and let it pass because we thought the woman would come after us. She didn't. You know, she was just in awe.
Okay.
As we went down the subway steps, we heard the train coming, and we both wanted to make a dash for it. They have these huge blocks of tile, you know, as part of the decoration item. And she went on one end, and I went on the other, and we were both snapped back. You know? And needless to say, we missed the train. Because we both ended on our keisters. Jack and I had a lot of funny incidents that, you know, but that's just a sample way. Also had a song that we both loved classical music, and we used to have different ways to memorize. I think that we must have had music appreciation where we had to, you know, they would ask us who the composer was. And I remember singing with her, Narcissus is white, the flower of my delight. Or no, Amaryllis, written by Geese, sells bananas 5 cents a piece. But that's how we knew that Amaryllis was written by Geese. We made up a number of those, you know, and giddy, 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 goon, giddy, goon, giddy, goon. That was the one, the hill of the mountain, giddy, goon. So we spent a lot of time together. My parents liked her, and her parents liked me. It was just, and she didn't have any siblings, so she was very special girl. And some people, nobody's indispensable, but some people are irreplaceable. And I hope she's in a better place, because she ended up with cancer, you know. To this day, I have a friend, Irma. My father used to call her Stuffed Irma.
Aw.
No, but she wasn't. She's very thin, very attractive. My friend Irma, she went on to the commercial school, but we have kept in touch to this day. Now she's a widow, but she quite frequently we email. The opportunity to come and stay. You know, we're both getting older. She's, I guess she might be a year younger than I am, or some months younger, but she is a little younger. And Annette Wachtler, who lives in Florida, also recently, last year, became a widow, and she lives in Florida. And I always hear from her birthday, anniversary, never forgets, always remembers. And Kiki, my Greek friend, who was in junior high school, just junior high school, but boy, it made some imprint. She didn't go to the high school I did see. She elected to go to the commercial high school they had, which I've seen in the newspaper, that school. It's different now. They use it for different purpose. But we kept friends, and it was fascinating for me to meet her family. They were really Greek. Her mother was an immigrant, you know. They were wonderful, wonderful people. And Kiki lives on the east part of Florida with her husband, Van, and she writes me. And sometimes there are no friends like the old friends, so they go all the way back, you know, almost 80 years.
Your extra
Oh, actually, it was usually something involving music, you know.
So you were in the choir,
Yeah.
but you also did
I
Yiddish
was on
club,
the
didn't you?
student organization, you know, involved with that, you know. But I also helped Kiki with the newspaper, school paper. I wrote articles and all that. And I ended up in high school, I was the salutatorian. And when I read, I think I found it someplace. It's so interesting to read what you wrote when you were 16 years old. I remember that on my graduation picture there were two. One was a little more serious, and my teacher, my Latin teacher, said one was Il Ponderoso, and I forget the other one that he wrote, but one was the serious one. I looked so innocent. We have it someplace in the house. That would be a nice photograph for somebody to keep with the long hair. The long stringy hair, that's something Jackie and I had in common. Although hers was dark, but it was also straight.
But you were also involved in a Yiddish program, no? Didn't you go to Yiddish school?
And when I went to elementary school, I went after school 2 or 3 times a week to Yiddish, to learn Yiddish. But I was only able, that was more of a secular, it was Jewish, but it was secular, cultural. So that their high school was on a Saturday in Manhattan. So it's not only that you would write, but you'd have to ride to get there. Out of the question at that point in my family. If it had, it's a matter of timing. It had been a few years later, my father might have looked in the other direction. But I went up to high school, but it had to have been very good training because it was a wonderful foundation for me. Of course, in my case, it was enhanced because every weekend I heard it, I spoke it. I mean, it was just natural to me. That was a real gift Papa gave me, and he explained that the reason he thought it would be more useful for me to go to, and he had to pay for it, but it wasn't a lot of money, to a Yiddish school, was because Hebrew would be of no use to me. Since I'm not counted in the minyan, why do I have to learn Hebrew? So he chose for me to learn the Yiddish. And interestingly enough, when my sister came along, my brother, definitely my sister went to Hebrew school. My sister was Hebrew. But that was a real gift. I loved it.
It's interesting that my friends growing up, they all went to Hebrew school. I don't know
Yeah.
anybody who went to Yiddish school.
Yeah.
So
And
it
they were
changed.
called the arbitering schools. Some of them tended to be socialistic workman's circle, socialistic,
Mm.
bordering some of them even on communistic, which my father was not happy about, but he felt they weren't going to get me. I was learning the Yiddish, and that was it. But the songs they sing all have to do with brotherhood. They still exist today. And to my delight, I now have a grandson that is taking Yiddish in college.
Which one?
Jason.
Uh,
Jason had asked me, he said, Berkeley offers, and there's only 4 kids in the class, offers a course in Yiddish. What do you think, Bob? I said, if you learn to speak Yiddish, we could talk and your parents won't know what we're talking about.
That's
And he does, and he happens to be very enjoyable for him. He really does enjoy it. I told him he would. It's a fun language to learn, So I'm sorry I didn't go further. I would have, but it was unthinkable that I'd be going to write on a Saturday, Oh,
through high school.
I took that war course, that's what they called it, drafting, and then you had a choice of taking typing for a year and stenography, and the choices were Gregg or Pittman. So I had 1 year of stenography, which of course I'm never using it, forgetting totally, and typing. But because I had Latin and Spanish in high school, yeah. And then we had those Regents exams, remember, that we had to get through. But as I said, it was during the war years, so we had to practice hiding under the desk if there would be an air raid.
I remember doing that too for the atom bomb.
Yeah.
That would have done a lot of good. Huh?
And, we had some rationing that we got through. But I went to school with the trolley car.
What were the things that you would do to amuse yourself?
Oh, sing. Yeah, that's it, sing. Try to imitate what I heard on the radio. I did like to read a lot. But that's what I like to do. I wasn't very good at sewing, things like that. Usually I tried to imitate the arias, even though I
So you
didn't
were
know
listening
the
to the
words.
opera?
Oh, yeah, opera, yeah.
Or lead?
I also, we had those green sheets that came out for a penny a piece, I think, every Friday. And had the lyrics of all the songs that the big bands were playing, so I memorized the words. And I still remember a lot of them. But I like to sing Una voce poco fa, my voice was higher then. I was able to sing some of the coloratura arias I sang. I like the Jewel song from Faust, but that's before I even started studying, that was what I enjoyed. The other thing I enjoyed doing was when my mother was down visiting her friends, I would go into the living room and I would pretend that it was the amphitheater of an operating room. And the chief surgeon insisted that I be his assistant. He would not perform the operation. I was there, and people were sitting and watching this operation, and I was acknowledging the applause. But I was by myself, so I could pretend, The same thing with the singing also. I would just pretend, But not when anyone else was in the house. That's how I amused myself.
Where did the green sheets come from?
I forget I think we bought them in the candy store. They came out every week. Sometimes they repeated from the week before what was the top songs of the day, and we memorized those words. Everybody had them. It was things that you and your friends did all the time. Well, anything by Jane Austen, I know I enjoyed reading her work very much. And I like mysteries, Agatha Christie, you know. And I always felt I should read more biography. My father said you could learn a lot, you know. But I like to lose myself in fantasy, I guess. But nothing that would be frightening. I didn't feel that I wanted to spend my time reading something that would frighten me. So it had to have a happy ending. And I was not averse to looking at the last page. My father didn't care. My mother had a prejudice about comic books. You'd have to really hide them from her. And if she found any, she threw it out. So sometimes if you had borrowed it for a friend, you had to be extra careful that she wasn't around, you know, to see it. She thought that was a waste of time. You know, poor literature. I don't think so. I think maybe our entertainment was going to the movies, you know. We didn't play games. And I never learned to play the games that women do all the time now, whether it's canasta or... I never took to that. I think I'm a sore loser. So I don't like to play a game I can't win. It doesn't pay for me to do it. I mean, I have learned to act like a good sport once. Second time already, I'm not such feeling so great, so I didn't indulge in that.
But you play bridge.
Oh, yes. I was pulled into that in the office that I worked because people went on vacation and they needed that fourth person. So I bought this 30 Days to Better Bridge or something, and it worked for me. And I enjoyed it. Every lunchtime, you know, 5 times a week we would play bridge. But that started because they needed that fourth. But like I don't go out to play bridge now. Well, of course, my mother agreed that we could have a turtle. That I don't know. I guess we got it at the pet store,
A little
and we
painted
named
one?
yeah,
Yeah.
named her Penelope. And surprisingly, my mother allowed us to put it on linoleum floor and crawl around. We'd feed it. We had it quite a while, but it stood in. It was like in the fishbowl sort of kind of thing on the windowsill. And one summer day, Penelope disappeared. We went downstairs to look in the dirt, you know, where the bush was, and Penelope wasn't there. That was the end of that. We had guppies, and keeping that thing clean was a chore. She said, you have to keep it clean, but she insisted that we keep it clean. And they multiply very quickly, you know, so if you don't watch, they can eat their young even. But that's all we really had in the way of pets. And my brother would have loved to have had a dog during those years. So we never did have any because we lived in the projects, and at that time, now it's different, but at that time you weren't permitted to have any kind of pet. Maybe a bird, but we didn't want the bird. I guess we just didn't want to clean it, you know.
When they came
Oh,
along.
I loved them. Well, actually, when Morty was born, and that what stunned me about that was, you know, I was 6 and a half, and I had never been in the bed with my parents. My father took me into the bed with him, and he woke me and he said, Goldie, you have a brother. I said, yeah. Turned over on the other side. What happened was, he had jaundice. Once he got over the jaundice, it was my job to wheel the carriage, and wherever I went, people would stop and look at this beautiful child. And I felt so proud that this beautiful baby was my brother. They could only admire him, but he belonged to me. And I really, through all our lives together, Morty and I never had a problem. I loved him, and he loved me, and then when Ricky came along, I was in college when Ricky came, and so she was the pet of me and my friends, and there was never any sibling rivalry at all.
So there's 6.5 years between you and Morty.
Yeah, and
And
16 and a half
16.
years between
Wow.
Ricky and myself. I have to point out the fact that when I lived with my parents, and my brother had to shift to living on a cot in the living room instead of in the bedroom, and he never, in all the years, never said anything about, what I did for you. Never, ever. It was just, that's what we had to do to accommodate it. And my brother amused us a lot. He had a good sense of humor, quick, that he could make a joke out of whatever was happening at the time. And so, and my sister was, like my baby. I was very proud of the both of them. Both good-looking guys, I loved them. And they loved me. They showed me they loved me. I was very fortunate that way. When I hear of people having difficulty in families, it's very strange to me. Because I didn't see that in my father's family either. They were all for one and one for all. My father tells a story on his video, how what a surprise it was for them. But and that's interesting, and you might be interested, that actually she was getting a great deal of advice about aborting. And because, oh my goodness, you have a daughter in college and you're going to have a baby, it's like, what a scandalous. My mother didn't want to, because she was afraid. She had a feeling that all the bad things that happen to a woman if they have abortions. So she had this baby, and she was a joy to us. I mean, when I think of just that aspect of it, what we would have missed if we didn't have that Ricky. And my father never showed favoritism. He liked us each individually for our qualities, and it never was more or less. He did feel, and he said, that somehow a parent may seem to, because one child may be weaker and may need them more, but that you love all your children really equally. It's whoever needs you at the time. And Mama didn't show, except that Morty being the boy, and my sister and I always understood that he could get away with things that we couldn't. He could, call her funny names and she would laugh. If we did. Actually, I really think it's important, especially for the people that are going to be looking at it later on, that I include my love and appreciation and gratefulness to a few people that have been so important in my life. And I have to start with my sister. If ever there was anybody that made me feel wonderful about myself, good about myself, was always praising me and doing everything she possibly could to make me happy, it was my sister. I'm very grateful. She's one of the blessings in my life. And then along came her husband, Michael, who is just wonderful. I mean, he's been a blessing in our lives too. So it's my sister and Michael and Sandy and Morty. They've always made me feel important and needed and wanted. And it had a lot to do with the development of my personality. Then there were other people in my life that I want to make sure that their names are mentioned at least, like Joanne, and this gentleman next to me. What do you want? My teachers, I remember that teacher in elementary school, Mrs. Werbin, and my singing teachers, Miss Zadie and Bernice Bramson. Of course, I did mention Roger, who to this day remains friends. He lives in Florida. We email each other every single day. It could be 2 sentences, but we do keep in touch. My Rabbi Taft. I know the problem with doing this is that you leave out somebody. It's like the Academy Awards. But I did want to make sure to get at least those people in. I have a cousin, Carol Plessa, that is very attentive to me, and Joanne, my friend Joanne Cohn, who is so wonderful. She was the lighting director in Fiddler when I did it, and she really made me look beautiful with her lighting. And she was always there. She's a wonderful, wonderful friend. And I've gotten to the point in my life now when a lot of my good friends are gone. My childhood friend Jackie and my friend Pat, people heard me speak about them a lot. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that really you don't get where you are alone. You need those other people who support you along the way. And that's what I wanted to make sure to get into this video.
Take your teeth out.
Well, and so the tooth was worn out, so you had to take it out, stick in a false one.
top teeth.
These are the top teeth.
So boys, if you don't brush your teeth, this
No.
is what's going to happen to your teeth.
I used to.
One with your teeth? I can't.
You wanna yeah, you could take out your teeth. I could take out my teeth. Watch. Let me do it.
Take your teeth out.
I just did.
Take it out.
You like it better without?
What age was it? 16? Baba, is 8 plus 8, Baba?
You see anything? No.
Baba, you open your mouth again. I see teeth. I don't.